Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to introduce Francesco Starace, CEO and General Manager of Enel. When Francesco Starace took the office in 2014, the European energy market was facing weak demand, excess generation capacity, a macroeconomic recession, and policy uncertainty. The company was facing a critical moment. Debt levels were high, and Enel was heavily reliant on fossil fuels. The energy landscape was shifting toward renewables, and Enel needed to change course quickly. Francesco took bold steps. Under his leadership, Enel transitioned from a traditional utility company into a global leader in clean energy. At the time he took over, Enel had only a fraction of its energy portfolio in renewables. But since then, Enel has invested over 40 billion euros in renewable energy, making it one of the largest private operators of renewable energy in the world, with over 54 gigawatts of renewable capacity, a number that continues to grow. Talking about future, Enel has committed to phasing out coal completely by 2027 and aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2040. Thanks to his vision, Enel's revenue grew almost 70%, closing at $148 billion in 2023, and the company serves over 73 million customers worldwide, playing a critical role in Europe's clean energy transition. Beyond the numbers, Francesco also introduced the Creating Shared Value model, ensuring that Enel's growth benefits not just its stakeholders, but the communities it serves. Today, Enel's innovations can be found anywhere, from Europe's largest solar farms to remote microgrids in Latin America, bringing energy to previously underserved areas. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Francesco Starace with a huge round of applause. Mr. Starace, welcome to the Yale School of Management.
Thank you very much, actually.
Thank you, Mohammed. Francesco, welcome. Hello, I'm John Iwata. I'm here with the Yale School of Management. I'm a lecturer, and also, along with Ted Snyder and Ravi Dar, I co-lead the Yale Program on Stakeholder Innovation and Management. And it's our pleasure to welcome Francesco to Yale and the Global Network today. I want to also note that Francesco's day started in Rome, where he flew today to New York City, and then somehow miraculously got from New York City to New Haven, Connecticut, without running into all kinds of traffic jams. So thank you. It's quite a gift of your time. Thank you. I want to mention that students here at Yale in this course, they had the advantage of reading and studying a case study that we have developed with Francesco's support on Enel. And if any on the Global Network would like access to that case study, of course, we can make that available to you. So part of what the case gets into, and for the benefit of our colleagues on the Global Network, I just want to net out a few things. Mohammed did a great job describing the circumstances of when you became CEO, but perhaps you can paint a fuller picture of the state of the company when you became CEO in 2014, and maybe you could also sort of walk us through the state of the company's relationships with its key stakeholders, customers, investors, and others.
Thank you. Look, the company was, had just completed a very large and comprehensive acquisition program that was necessary because for antitrust considerations, Enel had a size that was way too big for it itself. So there was a consideration that made it necessary for Enel to dispose of about 15,000 megawatts of generation in 3 different companies to create an internal competition in the Italian market, leave some distribution assets in the large cities, again, for a misguided concept of competition or regulated assets, which make no sense. But anyway, it was clear that the company could not grow that more in the country. So the CEOs that preceded me started growing in 3 different ways. One, in a multi-utility concept, so saying, I remain in Italy, but I grow on telecommunication, on water distribution, so in a direction of diversifying the business at the same geography level. That didn't really work. It proved to be very difficult to construct a multi-utility concept at that time. Probably today with technologies that we have, it would be different, but at that time it was not useful. And the others two that preceded me basically went out and bought assets that were on the market. Remember, this was a time, the first decade of 2000, in which Europe, by and large, but also, I mean, there was a privatization of energy assets mandated by the EU directive that tried to push competition in the system. So the company bought a lot of things, companies, let's say, and we found at 2014 a presence that was pretty scattered. We had a company in Russia, pretty large. We had a very large company in Spain, the incumbent actually in Spain, Endesa. Through Endesa, we owned what was and still is the largest multi-country position in Latin America. So Chile, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, and Argentina. Then on its own, Enel had acquired assets in Romania, in Greece, in Slovakia with a nuclear power plant under construction. I mean, like that. So the company had a huge projection outside of Italy, and had accumulated a large debt. The worst part of it was that the biggest acquisition, which was about a 40 billion euros acquisition for Endesa, happened a few months before the crash of the financial market in 2007-8. So it was really a bad timing for that. But you know, the issue was actually that all these acquisitions were basically attached to the company. So you had Italy, and then what was called international division, which was a multi-companies patchwork with very little in common between themselves. These companies were just owned by Enel, but not really managed in many ways, and they didn't have much in common. So, and then, I forgot to say, into 2010, because of debt considerations, Enel had also created another company within itself called Enel Green Power, and had put it on the market to raise capital. This was a 3 billion something IPO, and so there was also another listed company there. I forgot to say, many of these companies were also listed. So this Enel was a little bit of a monster with a listed company owning a lot of other listed companies, sometimes owning other listed companies in turn. So it's a really complex governance riddle in many ways. But it was a big company, the biggest in size, not in market cap, because the markets were scared about the setup, and they didn't really understand the value there.
You know, as the case unfolds based on our interviews, given what the circumstances of the company, that sounds like there were so many different things you could have done. Where did you start? What did you set into motion, and why?
Look, I remember when we met the first time, I said, look, at the end of the day, it's super complex and very articulated, lots of languages, different regulatory frameworks, different stock regulators, whatever. But at the end of the day, let's see what we do. What we do, we live between two universes, the universe of customers and the universe of machines. The machines are the plants we operate to satisfy the customer needs. So that's it. That's what we do. So, by the way, technology works the same everywhere. So machines actually unite us. So a turbine is a turbine everywhere. A transmission line works the same way everywhere. So let's put this aside. Customers divide us. They speak different languages. They have different taxation issues. They have different tariffs. They have different regulatory frameworks. They're the ones that really mess it up. So can we change this? No. We need to adapt to this and set up an organization in which companies are just a necessary evil. And what drives the organization is that we need people in charge of machines whose first and foremost, let's say, intent is to make sure that they are well managed, properly maintained, and that investments are adequate for this. And people in charge of customers whose first task is raise cash, because actually customers pay the bill. So cash comes from customers, get into the company pays the debt, distributes dividend, and reinvests. The investment we put in charge of these managers of technology, the cash in charge of geography managers. So we created a matrix, a two-dimensional matrix, machines and customers. And we said, you guys, your first and foremost KPI, your first and foremost attention is make sure you use their cash that we make available to you to invest in the right way. You want to invest in growth? Grow. It must be a certain kind of growth. You need to invest in maintenance. It's your balance. It's your task to find the right balance. And these units were global, so they had no segmentation between geographies. So there was a guy in charge of generation, a guy in charge of networks globally. And the other guys, we said, you have to raise the cash, and you have to interface the regulators and all the stakeholders in local currency. You are not going to allocate cash. You just raise it. Okay? And we needed to find 250 people that had the capability to understand at the intersection of these two dimensions that they had two bosses. So we said, guys, we are going to explain to you this thing that I just told you, more or less the same way. We're going to explain this to you 2 times, not a third one. So if you need a third explanation, you will find another job where you have only one boss. No shame. There's lots of good jobs. So don't ask us to write a manual of the matrix. We're not going to write it. Either you get it or it's not for you. And so we organized the company. The first thing we did, we set up this organization that was pretty easy to conceive, and I would say also to explain. But you can imagine that for a company that has been established in a country, and it's perhaps the incumbent in that country, all of a sudden to understand that the investments in the generation of that company are decided by a guy sitting somewhere else, based on certain criteria that need to be discussed. And that was a little bit controversial, but we really did it in, I would say, the first 8 months. And the first 250 guys that we found, after a year, 30 needed a third explanation, so they were changed. But it was pretty straightforward in that sense. And it it reduced the complexity mindset in a big way. Beyond this, there was a terrible job for all the, I would say, legal people, the financial people, all the people that had to disentangle all the hardware pieces that were used to work in a different way and rewire them in that way. And that took another year before we finally were able to do it. But that was the first thing we did. Just change the organization so that we were free to think in a different manner.
At some point, you issued 2 dicta or 2 requirements as a condition of investment. Can you describe the 2 and why you put them into place?
Look, they were not diktats, they were observations, okay? And basically, what happened during the first decade of 2000 and continued, I would say, also in the second part, is massive write-offs of assets that were required basically by the auditors. I'm saying, you have a power plant, it's the 3rd year in which this power plant is not working anymore. Come on. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. This power plant is stranded. And this happened across the industry. This was everywhere in Europe in a big way, because technology was changing the rules of the game, and also the market pushing efficiency and competitiveness into the system clearly was showing that certain infrastructure was not anymore needed. And we started saying, okay, that's it, but why do we find this solution? Why are we in this position? Why are we writing off plants that are pretty new? Okay, why are we doing that? And how, I mean, why this should be different next time? I mean, at the end of the day, this is bound to happen again and again and again. The industry was, and still, I would say now it's a little less like that, but it was a very long-term industry investment cycle. So you invested on a 5 to 10, 20 years time horizon. So when you look at what evolution of technology throws at you, and you say, I am investing into this thing, and this thing will be competitive tomorrow, but also 20 years down the road? No, it's impossible, unless you really have an incredible opportunity in front of you. So we said, to cut this risk, we have to start thinking that we need to invest in things that take less time to come to fruition, so that your money starts to work much earlier. That means that there is a better chance that these investments are not stranded or are stranded less, because technology evolution is going to happen anyway, and it's beyond control, and it's outside of potentially any speculation on which direction is it going. So all we can do is mitigate this risk by shortening the exposure. So we said 3 years, which basically was like blasphemy, because 3 years for this, there was nothing in 3 years, barely a combined cycle gas turbine power plant, barely. Coal plants were out, large hydroelectric dams out, nuclear out. There was not yet, but when it came also, offshore wind was out because of the same rule. So we did that, and I remember the people, in particular the generation people were affected. They said, look, that means we don't grow. There's nothing else we can do. We cannot grow our business anymore. How we could do it? And we said, look, you can do renewables, and they are much faster, but they require an incredible amount of opportunities. I mean, one plant, 50 megawatt, 200 megawatts. One coal plant, 2,000 megawatts. So you needed to multiply this number of opportunities in a big way, which we did. So we did, look, you can grow, but you have to completely change your business model, multiply the number of opportunities by a factor of 10 or 100, actually. At the end, it was 100. So we had an incredible boost in trying to find different things and push them into the investment committees. I think after the first 2-3 years, we were at 2 years. Now the company is running at 2 years. So you invest in 2 years, you start to generate cash. So that was the point. And I think that proved to be very, very helpful. Also, because it was not a discussion, this technology is better than the other. It was not a discussion, I prefer coal, I don't like this, I don't like that. It was a discussion, does it fit the time? At the end of the day, that's it. And it worked.
And the other...
So it was a bit cynical. I mean, I said,
well,
this is going to be a mistake anyway, but at least we have less money at risk on going forward.
So capital projects in the past 10 years or so,
yeah.
Big outlays.
Yeah.
Then when they come online, big write-offs, write-downs.
I mean, they come online after 10 years, so yeah. Maybe things have happened in the meantime. You know, right. And you think of evolution of technologies is now right. Faster, but it was fast already there. Right. And it's actually accelerating. So I'm saying this is, by the way, not just for the power generation. Any business is affected by this in big ways.
So you say to your team, 10, now 3 or less, and you had another requirement or observation having to do with communities.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I tell you, this came out in a very bad way, because there was this is a true story. There was a power plant, a hydroelectric power plant in Chile that existed since about 10, 15 years. So it was already there, built, working. And the communities around this power plant hated us. They really hated us. And the life was miserable for people working there. And so I tried to understand, you know, what happened? You know, why these guys keep hating us? What did we do? Not us, but those that built this plant. And what they did is they built the dam. They agreed with the government of Chile that a few villages needed to be moved because they would go underwater when the dam would be filled. There was a negotiation. Finally, the agreement was reached. At the time of filling the dam, these people came to the company. This was a Chilean incumbent, Endesa at that time, and said, look, we forgot the cemetery, because there is a cemetery in the village, and we have to move the cemetery. And the guy said, why you need to move the cemetery? They're dead people anyway. So they filled the dam. And you know, this story is true, okay? And you know, when you think about that, you say, how many mistakes like this were made and could be potentially be made again? So what would have cost these guys to move a cemetery of 20 people? Nothing. Just they were in a rush. They said, don't bullshit, come on, fill it. So this episode, I remember when they told me this, I said, I was so mad. I said, I can't believe this. So we said, let's do this. We will have a policy. That's very stupid. It says, never against. So we go explain what the idea is. People don't understand. They want to hear you explain it again and again, try to understand what is that they can get out of that. Lots of stories. I could go on for a long time. But if at the end you find an opposition that you don't understand, that means there is something you don't understand. Better leave it, because it's a risky bit that you go there in a place where there are things you don't understand. Just leave it. By the way, because we have so many opportunities, who cares? Okay, we don't do it, and we go somewhere else. So that was another twist, completely different approach, and it worked very well. Actually, you know, when people understand that they need to explain in a comprehensive manner what is the point, not necessarily because you come from somewhere or because you're an engineer, you're so clever and understand everything. We improved also the relationship with communities, because they were much more outspoken and clear about what is it that they actually were expecting out of that we were going to do. And that helped in a big way.
So when you put together those two requirements about the shift for investment from 10, let's say 10 to 3, and this never against the community. So we're going to walk away, even after we've developed all this planning. What effect did that have on the culture of Enel?
I mean, the first one was much more, I would say, circumscribed to a group of people that was those that designed things, and so the engineering. They like to design big things. Engineers love that. So you had a lot of work to, like, it's not so bad that, you know. So there was a little bit of technical people, like maybe 3,000, okay? Then I would say it affected roughly a population of less than 5,000 people. The other one affected a lot of other guys. I mean, it affected the whole company because you live in a community. You always are in contact with the community. And by the way, because of the nature of our business, which is a stable in the years business, you're there for ages. You're into the community and you don't go away tomorrow. You stay for as long as you can. That was the whole company affected. So it took, but I would say it was, those that opposed it were very little. I mean, they were just people that didn't want to have patience, but they were, I mean, it was obviously agreed by everyone. I mean, obviously, there's something, I'm not saying anything crazy, you know, against the community that you want to live in 20 years. It's like impossible. But yeah, so it was easy, but then to understand what exactly it meant, it took a little bit more.
We're going to go to questions now, and then we'll open it up to the first of all, any questions or comments from students here at Yale? Hi, Christian.
Thank you very much. I'm a little bit curious. I remember recently that the new CEO of Intel is an engineer. And
Sorry?
The new CEO of Intel,
Yeah.
a year ago now, as an engineer, and there were a lot of people in that space that were happy to hear that someone was coming from a non-business background into that. Oh, it's on. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Non-business background coming into the office of CEO, and he was going to be bringing challenges with the idea that he might have a better insight into the company to maybe bring those challenges or to bring solutions to those challenges. I'm curious to know, with your background coming from an engineering, science background, did you feel at all that gave you a different view than what other people around you in your office were having, or other people in the industry were having, as to what was possible and how you could change the business going forward?
You know, what helped me was the fact that I had worked in construction. So if you work in a construction site, your capability to handle stress is infinite. I mean, you have an incredible capability. You're never really stressed. You see people stressed and you say, what's your problem? You don't know what you're talking about. That's the first thing. And the other one that helped me was that I was working on the other side of the table. So I was a supplier to the industry because I worked in General Electric before and ABB before. So I was supplying them with turbines, with hardware, and they were buying. And I saw the way they were thinking and the way they were buying, the way they were planning. And when I came into Enel, I was able to understand things, having had that experience, that the people in Enel had problems in understanding because they were so much used to it. But if your question is, can today, this is already a long time ago, 2014 is like 10 years ago. So by the rule of 10 years, it's a long time. So I'm saying, today, do you think you can put someone not coming from the industry on top of a large company and complex company like this for a long time? I think it's a really difficult proposition. Really difficult. The world it became so full of different things moving everywhere that to be a great manager, or it's not enough. You need to know a little bit, more than a little bit, what the business is all about somehow. Yeah. I think there was a question over there. I cannot, yeah.
Question about when you say never against the community, were there any sort of like best practices for gray areas that may have occurred? Like the communities can be very divided on some issues, as we know. How would you kind of sift through that in order to determine what was against the community versus not?
I think your good point, very good point. Community are divided, but you know, miraculously, they tend to unite one way or another when they know that you are not going to push it too much. So you say, okay, you don't like it, we go. Oh, no, wait a minute. Then they talk between themselves. So it's as, you know, they're divided when they think they want to show the other party who's negotiating best. That's the reason why they're divided. But actually, when they say, look, if you make it so complicated and scary because these guys are coming, they understand we are a mess because we divided and we argue one against the other, they go away. That cures a lot of that. I tell you, it cures a lot of that.
Mohammed?
You emphasize the importance of shorter investment cycles. How did you assess which investment would provide
Faster returns in a rapidly evolving technological landscape.
Yeah, like I said, we said technology, this is an infrastructural business, the one we're in, okay? This is not a startup, okay? So we said, can we give to our shareholders technology risks and sell them as if this was a peaceful infrastructure business? The answer is no. So we would invest in a technology only once this technology is relatively proven and I would say competitive. Then there are other technologies that belong to more an innovative part of the investment curve in which Enel, like all utilities around the world, tried to venture with its own feet. So in fact, Enel had the venture fund. Now, you know that venture funds typically need to have a certain capability to fail. Because you're taught, and it is true, most of the times you fail. And sometimes you win, and this win is so fantastic that it covers all the failures. Okay? But because we cannot fail, because we are an infrastructure company, our investment cannot fail, by definition. So these poor guys of the Enel Investment Fund, every time they came with an idea, they were grilled, you know, what happens if this, what happens if that? They were never really able to do the job they were told to do, because the risk appetite was toxic for innovation, for venture investment. So I decided to stop that. We said, we are not going to have venture funds. What we will do, we partner with venture funds. So we take venture funds, we say, look, I think Adam has a great idea, his startup makes sense to us. It might fail, but maybe not, it's your job. What I can tell you, from my point of view, it can work. And if it does, I commit to take Adam's company and grow it at scale within our own company. Plus, we are not going to have exclusivity with Adam, because what we want is just the time advantage that this gives us. That's enough. That worked.
Todd?
Thank you very much. I had a question following up about the risk that you just mentioned. As you mentioned kind of when you took over the company that it had been going through a lot of M&A activity, and the case in particular mentioned a fairly substantial debt burden for the firm. So I'm just curious how you approached the decision about moving from the investment type, which is a pretty substantial shakeup and reorganization of the business strategy, amid kind of the pressure of still meeting your debt obligations rather than, you know, necessarily in a vacuum.
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, you notice that since we started speaking, we spoke 100% so far only about generation, right? But maybe you don't know, I tell you, half of the EBITDA of Enel came from distribution assets, and roughly 40 or sometimes 50% of the investments were in distribution lines. Why I mention that is because maybe we'll find the time later to say why this is so important. All of a sudden in the world, everybody's saying, the networks, the networks, the networks, the networks. Okay, so to answer your question, when you take that into mind, you say, I already have about 50% year on, year off, but more or less of my investment into the transmission lines attached to regulatory framework somehow linked to the return available return on assets or asset base, and different story like that. So a very quiet, kind of steady flow of investment going there. So the problem is only on the 40% of the generation portion. Here, the question is, do you want to put money into more maintenance, so keeping your plants better shape, or growth, or what is the right balance between maintenance and growth? That's where CapEx goes. And we said, we're not going to tell you guys. It's your responsibility to find out. Obviously, in the psychology of an executive, worth its name, growth is important. I mean, there's something in the mind of people. Growth is considered the best guarantee for advancement in the career. Growth is more satisfactory because we are growing like individuals, and growth is positive. So you don't need to stimulate growth. It's already there. But you need to tell the guy, you can grow, but if your plants fall in pieces, that's your problem. So it's you have to choose the balance. And doing that and giving the constraint of the 3 years and the never against, growth is there, but pretty well, how can I say, disciplined. Yeah? Mistakes can be made, of course, but they are minor. And you have to tolerate that in a company, minor mistakes happen. Otherwise your life is miserable. Yes.
Okay, let's go to Edom.
You have your startup ready.
Thank you so much for being here. We're joined today by our colleagues from universities all across the globe. Uh-huh. And I think that's one of the things that makes SOM very special. Compared to other business schools in the United States, about 50% of our student body here at SOM actually are international students. Mm-hmm. And so reading about NL, it seems like there's a lot of parallels with this global international focus.
Yeah.
Dozens of countries, you're in dozens of countries. And I'm just wondering, if you could elaborate a little bit more about how you approached learning more about other cultures, learning more about how to interact and engage in other geographic areas. I feel like that must have posed some sort of challenge. How did you get up that skill curve, and how did you build up that competency?
It's a fantastic question, because you start from the bottom. You say, at the end of the day, why am I in this place? Why am I in Chile? Because we bought a company that had a company that is in Chile. Yeah, that's the why is. But the reason why I want to stay in Chile and keep working in Chile, that's the point. So we decided at a certain point that we had to look at the world from the outside and say, where is it that it makes sense for me to be, and where does it not? And it makes sense to be in a place where your work finds its way to final customers. Why I'm putting this point is that in the utility world, there are segmentations that are totally artificial. There is a generation. So you could be in South Africa only with generation, because the regulatory framework does not allow you to go downstream. I would say that place going forward is not the strategy number 1 or number 2 place. Because the reason for you to be in a place is to serve the people of that place. That's the strongest reason to be there, and the only one, actually, at the end of the day. So why are we producing this energy? For whom? That's what really matters. Then you wonder if it is renewables, if it is competitive, if it blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the reason is, are there customers or not? You are not entitled to have them. Okay, that's maybe not the country I want to be in. Okay? So we exited Russia, not because of the war, but because we did not have that downstream. We had only one customer, which was the Russian railways, which is the largest railway system by far. But one single customer is also not a good position to be. So we exited Russia. So the yes and no where to stay was basically whether we could have a chance, and we wanted to, and had a possibility to grow a customer base and therefore serve them. In terms of how do you get to understand the people, people are people everywhere. I mean, it's not rocket science. You just listen. You have to be patient to listen. I tell you, in our business, it's super easy. We have only one product that does no smell. You cannot see it. You cannot touch it. If you touch it, it's bad for you. So it's a super stupid thing. For me, it's easy. Now, if you tell me shampoos, then that's a big problem for me. But in general, there are products and products. In our case, it's super easy.
Yeah, I want to build on that, then we'll go to the other questions here too. But when I first met you, 2019 or 2020, and I talked about stakeholder capitalism and so forth, you said, I don't want to talk about stakeholder capitalism. I want to talk about purpose.
Yeah. The reason is this, yeah. Purpose is, at the end, the essence of stakeholder capitalism, because if you understand the reason why your company exists and why it has, if you want, a license to operate going forward, then you automatically align with the right stakeholders.
Did you have to revisit your purpose?
No, but what the purpose? We had a purpose statement that was very long, and it was you could see, like, you can read purpose statements just for fun, and you see how many times it was revised by many people. Each one left a trace, and then you said, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything, because it's so incredibly large and encompassing that and so detailed in the meantime, because so we had something like that. It was this long. And if you ask people, what is our purpose statement, they didn't even know that was it. It was just in the walls. So we had, at a certain point, the need to create a new brand. This was an issue of branding. And the guy that came with this brand said, look, you have a fantastic opportunity here, but we need to define a purpose in a right way. And by the way, this was one part. Another part is that I should not say, but we went to another competitor of yours at the beginning with my team, and they said the purpose statement is useful also because it could prolong the life of company in the light of major changes if your purpose is strong enough and detached enough from the contingency of the moment. So that was a very nice, very intelligent way of doing that. So we looked at this purpose, but it was pretty obvious. I think there was a small check with 2,000 people, something like that. And the answer was almost unanimous. It was, the question was, why are we here? This was a very stupid question. Why are we here? I mean, in the job, obviously, not existentially. So, and they all said, the answer was to keep the lights on, to give people energy. It was all that, that was it. So eventually, that was the purpose, Because why? What is the need for this? Why do you need power? Power in itself is nothing, and electricity means nothing. Electricity is a way of doing other things. So we used that, we said, to empower sustainable progress. So open power. And it came pretty strongly, and it was the same in all geographies. There was not a single geography which had different purpose in their mind. It was fantastic. Really.
From a CEO perspective, what was the benefit? I mean, from an English major, those are nice words, but from the standpoint of a CEO,
the benefit was that people felt proud of that. They really finally said, yes, it is what we thought. They identified fully that. So it was fantastic, really. But very powerful, actually, extremely powerful.
Kyle, you have your microphone?
Hi, thank you. It's Kyle here. So I just want to ask, according to your experience,
you have to speak up a little bit.
According to your experience, have you come across any failed investment, like you put in money, put in effort, put in the labor force, but the investment, the project didn't finish?
Yeah.
And what's the most common deal breaker in the infrastructure investment, and how do you avoid these deal breakers?
Look, like I said before, mistakes happen, okay? So you see me, no? Okay. So I'm quite a nice guy. I am a nice guy, okay? But what I don't like, really, and I think this is, you should learn this, all of you guys, because you're all nice guys. You should learn not to tolerate in the company twisted behavior, twisted truth, so dishonest thinking, not mistakes. Mistakes happen. People are not all smart, okay? But people that try to be smart or try to have it their own way no matter what, I don't tolerate. So I don't know which of the two cases you're addressing. I mean, if it is people that didn't really get to the goal or didn't perform 100%, they get a second chance, a third chance. Maybe they are moved to a job that maybe is more fit for them, but it's okay. It's okay, okay? But if you find the toxic behavior, the arrogance, the ignorance that doesn't want to learn, the dogmatic approach that wants to preach, you better let them go quickly. Without, once you do it, you only say one thing, I should have done it before. I don't know if I answered the question. Okay.
I think we have a question from the network.
Yes, we do. They've asked that I question you on their behalf. So the first one is from Oleinka from Lagos Business School in Nigeria. She asks, how did the Sustainability Development Goal linked bonds work out for the company?
This came because at a certain point, I was made part of the Global Compact, in the board of the Global Compact. And this was, I think, 2017 or 2016, more or less. The Global Compact had defined the 17 SDGs. And they were working at what is called the compass, which is a breakdown of these 17 SDGs in sub, in order for a company to be able to refer somehow materially to these 17 sustainable development goals. So this started what I call the boring part of sustainability, which means you have also something that has to do with materially showing that what you try to do in one direction or the other has some progress. And I liked the SDGs because they were already done. They were already predefined in a way. And I think each of you, if you say, what is good for the world, define 10 major things, you will all find 10 major things and maybe forget the 11th, but there were 17. Don't ask me why. So we embarked and said, we are focusing the company on no more than 4 or 3 best of these 17. Otherwise, it becomes a nightmare. And obviously, we found those that fit better what we were doing. So there is SDG number 7, clean energy and supply for all. So things that obviously not all companies need to have 4. One can have 3 or 2. But I always say no more than 3 or 4, because even for a large company, it's a job to follow that. It also helped to focus the effort of people so that they had some kind of impact. Otherwise, any SDG is good, but at the end you disperse your forces and there is no satisfaction and no recognition of the people's job. So it was a little bit to motivate people also. Focus means a little bit more motivation.
And the last question from the community is from Daria from the University of Vancouver. And she asks, incorporating AI strategy into business strategy is a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
How do you foresee AI shaping the future of the energy sector?
I have to say one thing, that I have spoken to a lot of AI people lately, because the job that I'm doing also as an investor requires that. My personal thinking is that today there are less than 300 people in the world that understand exactly what AI is. Everybody else not, including me. So I would say, I will tell you something that I think is 3 years from now we will all laugh. Definitely AI is a huge help for many things. If you remember these 2 universes, machines and customers, they all generate an incredible abundance of data. The data that machines generate are not subject to legal constraints. The data that customers generate, different legislation, different regulation, different risks. So I think AI will work mostly in the customer segment, because people think that most of the value accrues from knowing what people think. But it's a pity, because I think machines have been talking to us for about a century, and we haven't understood their language yet. So maybe AI can decipher what these poor machines are trying to tell us with their noises, hisses, and vibrations, and tell us what to do with them in a better way. So I think it's going to be helpful in many ways and not particularly scary. But honestly, beware of those that tell you what to do with the AI, because I think no one really knows yet.
I have a question about your options in just leading the company, and here's what I mean. So Mohammed mentioned many different changes that took place when you were CEO. One is, at the beginning, I think about 30% of Enel power generation was renewable. and then it rose to like 60%.
Yeah.
And you became one of the largest renewable energy companies in the world.
Yeah.
You didn't mention that in our first conversation until 48 minutes.
Yeah.
And the market capitalization went up, I think at the peak, 150%.
Yeah.
So the shareholders richly benefited.
Yeah.
So when you think about stakeholders, profit, society would say renewables, shareholders want returns, et cetera. Before Francesco became CEO of Enel, he was the head of Enel Green Power.
Mm-hmm.
Very successful. You could have very rationally been named the CEO of the whole enterprise and said, for lots of reasons, for the environment, for moral purposes, for our future generations, and because I know, having led a very successful green unit, we are going to become a renewable energy company. Instead, you said, no more capital unless you figure it out.
Yeah.
You figure it out.
Yeah.
3 years or less. And by the way, if a community says we don't want you here, we're going to walk. And they said, why didn't you just say we're going to become a renewable energy company?
But I should say, the transition at that time was in a exponential phase in the renewable energy space. So you don't need to push it. It was sucking you in anyway. So there was no, even if I had declared it, we would have done more or less the same. So there was no point in making these big statements, which, by the way, I think are also dangerous because why, do you remember there was a time in the past where there was the alternative energy? The alternative energy was renewables. And I remember I made a joke in one of the various meetings with the oil and gas company saying, there will be a time where we are not going to be alternative, you guys are. So the issue is, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when I said before, what matters is who needs this energy and at what cost you can supply it, in what situations, at the best way. Renewables meet that requirement. I had it very clear. So there was no reason to oversell it. It was happening anyway. It happened. And you see, it's going on in both. Look, take this country. I went through several presidencies with different policy ideas. You're going to vote or not, I don't know. But it didn't change much, the trajectory, because it is in the money and that's it. It works. It's easier. It's faster. It's more economical. You don't need that. This is, at the end of the day, pretty stable. So I should say now that if you start a company today as a pure renewable energy company or pure nuclear energy company, you put yourself in a very narrow angle, and it's not really helpful because you need to understand you are or not competitive. Are you adding value for customers? Yes or no? If you have, that's it. But to label the technology is dangerous because technologies get old very quickly.
Any final questions for Francesco? Anything from the network?
David wanted to say something.
David?
Yeah.
So it's clear from a lot of what you've talked about how much Enel is able to accomplish. And so I have a question about some of the factors that went into that. And specifically, what was the most important? Was there something about the timing, whether in technology, policy, something like that? Was there something unique to Enel in terms of your expertise, your culture? Or was it something that Enel did first in being able to achieve these outcomes?
I think it's the fact that we did it consciously. That's the difference. Many companies did more or less the same things. You can see it. But we did it consciously of it. And it's funny because sometimes companies do things without understanding it really, just forced by events or by choices. So we decided that we wanted to do this. And then we did it. That's the difference. That's a big difference.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Oh, Adam, one more.
Your comments earlier about purpose is making me think about legacy. Now that you're on this side of your career, looking back on your experiences, I was wondering if you could share with us some advice or wisdom for us who are earlier in our careers and are thinking about how to approach the labor force with intentionality, thoughtfulness.
Why I accepted to come here, because I remember when I was in one of the, at a certain point, General Electric sold the company I was working with to ABB. This was 1986, something like that. So probably none of you were born even. So in 1986, this happened. I was in a construction site in Egypt. And, midway through the construction, this incredible earthquake, your company belongs to a group, all of a sudden to another group. But that time, like a month before, we were to finish the job anyway. So for us, it was at the level in which I was no change at all. But it was like a big. After a month that this was announced, I would say quite high-ranking GE executive came to this construction site and spent with us half a day explaining what would happen, what was his point of view, what advice he could give to us. And I said, this guy is amazing. I mean, he sold us, not him, but this, why is he spending his time? I really appreciated it, I should say. Not right away, but after a while when he left, I said, well, this guy is, we're not going to see him anymore anyway. He's not going to be with us anyway. He came and did that. So I really was struck by this. I was really thankful to him. And by the way, I never met him again. So I was not able to tell him this. I was really thankful that he spent his time and gave us this wisdom that he gave us, which I don't remember what it was. But anyway, so I think what matters in my case is that when you look at cases, this is a case we talked about what happened in that part 10 years ago, more or less, until more or less. Really, what matters is what will happen. I think you should look at this, but be careful not to extrapolate too much. That's the danger of these kind of things. There are moments of discontinuity in which you will be exposed to risks. You will have to find people that take a risk on you, which happened to me. I mean, I had people that took a risk on me. You will also learn from managers or executives that are awful in many ways. Learn not to be awful. I mean, not to learn. So you should look out in the future, because knowing what helped Enel is interesting, but not your point. I mean, you have to look outside. And I think for me, what I am here to tell you is, for example, what would happen now to Enel or to the whole, what is happening now in the energy world is an incredible opportunity and a transition that in my whole life, I've seen several transitions, but this one is of an order of magnitude and an intensity and a reach that is amazing. And it has a little bit to do with the generation and everything else to do with what customers do and what networks need to do in order for this to happen, one way or another. It's just inevitable. It's just the way in which it will manifest itself is fascinating. So it's interesting to know, certain things. I mean, keep for you the abstract things. Like, if you do things consciously, that's valid every time. Because that's really a big difference. The purpose is valid always. 3 years, 2 years, who cares? Something different will come up. It's not a big deal. They're just tools.
Francesco, well, we certainly value that you came all the way from Europe to be with us at Yale today on the same day, and also to be with our colleagues on the Global Network for Advanced Management. Please join me in thanking Francesco Starace.